Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.
It took me from a very confident person, because I was very confident in who I was at the time, down to someone who was fearful, ashamed, definitely ashamed, because my skin just looked horrible.
Hello, and welcome to Getting Clear on Psoriasis. I'm your host, David Brandt, and I've been living with psoriasis for more than 30 years. In this podcast series, we bring you stories about different people's experiences with psoriasis and hear from medical professionals who treat the condition every day. Our goal is to offer tools and resources to help you manage your psoriasis, seek out the best treatment options, and live a more full and productive life. This podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be substituted for medical advice. Please consult your own medical professional with any questions regarding medical condition, advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Back in the early 60s, there was an advertising campaign for a medicated shampoo designed to relieve something called the heartbreak of psoriasis. That campaign was a little over the top, to say the least, and it generated a fair amount of ridicule. But despite the melodramatic Madison Avenue spin, I think what those ads were playing on was the sense of shame that goes along with having a visibly unattractive skin condition.
I was in line at a zoo, a local zoo here in Chicago, and I had a lady turn around and look at me and was offended by my legs being affected and asked me if my sores were something that were contagious and why was I not covered up.
That's Melissa Witham-Voss from Waukegan, Illinois.
I very calmly told her that I had psoriasis. I told her that there was no more reason for me to be covered on a 95-degree day than her. I explained to her that it was a condition that was non-contagious, but I could still see in her face that she didn't believe me. She had absolutely no qualms with stepping away from me at that point. And this was way before COVID and things, so there was no immediate knowledge of, ew, get away.
I think one of the most common themes among those of us that have psoriasis is that we want to do anything we can to cover it up. And let's face it, appearance-wise, psoriasis can be jarring. It can cause people to recoil, thinking it has to be contagious, something to be avoided at all costs. And people who have that reaction often are not very receptive to learning what psoriasis actually is. But for people who live with the condition, being judged, like Melissa was, can be frustrating, unnerving, even traumatizing.
People need to be aware that it's not uncommon to have darker thoughts along with psoriasis because you feel like you hit a rock bottom. And I believe that most psoriasis sufferers feel that way, that you feel you've come to a point where you can't really see out or up. And it's usually around the time frame that you've been diagnosed for a little bit and you've tried a couple things and maybe failed them. You start to feel kind of a depression of, okay, where do I go from here? What's next? And then you start looking at it and you're like, is there anything left? Am I doomed? Is this it?
Melissa says when people reach that point, it's time to seek help from a healthcare provider, a support group, a counselor.
It's not a journey for the faint of heart. You have to really look after yourself in all the different ways.
I've been very fortunate that my psoriasis is relatively mild. It's mostly visible on my hands. I'm the catering director at a large hotel in Los Angeles, so I'm very conscious of needing to stay after my psoriasis every day. But for people with more severe cases, psoriasis flare-ups can cause painful red rashes on the skin. The skin often cracks and bleeds in different areas of the body. 79-year-old John Latella knows this all too well.
It's been difficult at times. I've suffered with depression that I had to take myself out of. It was painful at times. It was bloody at times. Sometimes you just say, I give up, but then you keep going. There'd be times when the pain of the burn was so much that I'd be in tears. You get at that point, you'd say to yourself, I just can't take it anymore. And you have to relax. You have to just say, I have to move forward. My children all knew what I was going through. They knew that I just couldn't do some things. But I never stopped doing the things that I wanted to do, even though it might have been very painful. I added on a room in our house, up and down a ladder. At the end of the day, it was very painful, but I knew I had to do it. Things I had to prove to myself.
So what's actually happening here? What's causing all the rashes, the itching, and the pain for so many patients like John? We talked to Dr. Ahmad Shatil Amin, who's an assistant professor at Northwestern University and a practicing dermatologist for 9 years.
Psoriasis, produces these thick plaques on the skin. And basically what you have is a lot of dead skin piling up on one another. And so that produces that scale. So oftentimes patients who have psoriasis leave a trail of scale behind them. Their bedrooms, their offices are often covered in scale. Their desks are covered in scale. Whenever they take off their shirt, there's like a plume of scale everywhere. When they have it on their scalp, they have scaling on their shoulders. A lot of patients with psoriasis will describe that their plaques are quite painful, especially patients who have psoriasis on their hands and feet. You'll hear stories about how a young person with psoriasis, has completely stopped dating because they're just afraid to be close to someone. They're afraid to experience physical intimacy with anyone because of their plaques. You'll hear stories about how patients have stopped going to the gym because they don't want to be on a treadmill in their shorts and have someone else stare at their psoriasis on their legs.
51-year-old Vicki Wilkerson from Louisiana says self-consciousness about her psoriasis was devastating.
It took me from a very confident person, because I was very confident in who I was at the time, down to someone who was fearful, ashamed, definitely ashamed, because my skin just looked horrible, to someone that was an outdoor type person, to hiding in my house, not really wanting to go outside. And, I didn't want anybody to see what I looked like.
Tammy Soretti, who lives near Pittsburgh, describes her own self-isolation.
I did lose some friends by canceling plans and being dubbed as unreliable, when really it was me not being completely honest, because I just didn't want to say, I can't put my underwear on, I can't put my bra on, I can't wear my pants. That's why I'm canceling. So I would just say, I'm not feeling well, or something came up. I think so many things came up that I did lose some of my friends along the way.
But Tammy also recalls that one of the most visible side effects of her psoriasis ultimately helped her to connect with others on a positive level.
I went 20 years without knowing one person that had psoriasis, and then finally losing my hair, and people were like, what happened to your hair? Well, it's psoriasis. And people that I've known since middle school were like, I have that too. I've been hiding it all my life. And what a waste. We could have all supported each other through this, but none of us knew because we were all hiding it.
And Vicki Wilkerson says that after 18 years, she's grown more confident using a direct approach with people instead of always hiding in the shadows.
Now, if somebody comments and they say something, I just flat tell them, look, it's psoriasis. And first and foremost, it's not contagious. You cannot catch it. It's hereditary on my part. So I just go into telling them and trying to educate them about psoriasis, so that maybe somewhere down the line, if they see it again, they're not going to give that other person the same reaction they gave to me.
So Vicki Wilkerson has developed a new self-confidence in educating people about psoriasis. And Tammy Soretti found support from people who she may not have thought would be supportive. Another psoriasis patient we spoke to is Catherine O'Leary. She also happens to be a clinical psychologist in the UK and works with people who live with various chronic illnesses. For her, it's also important to seek out things that bring comfort.
When you're struggling with psoriasis, the things that you do to look after yourself often go out the window. As psychologists, we talk about soothing activities. So the things that soothe you, they're the first things to go when you're under stress, when your psoriasis is bad. So, make sure that you practice those self-care things. And that might be, a walk on the beach or meditating. It might be curling up with a good book. But the things that just make you feel calm, make you feel relaxed, and make you feel soothed.
Dr. Mona Gohara is a dermatologist from New Haven, Connecticut. She says some patients feel judged because of their psoriasis and may be reluctant to tell their doctor about related conditions they're experiencing.
It's important to be transparent because it really can make a difference in treatment. So I think one, talking about what other symptoms you're having, arthritis, is there cardiovascular history? Two, talking about how this is affecting your life. And three, to be just honest. It doesn't faze me what people tell me in the office. I'm not judging you. I just want to know kind of factual information so we can come up with the safest and best treatment plan.
Straight talk with your doctor is so important. It's also crucial that psoriasis patients feel comfortable with the medical professionals they work with to address their condition. And that's what we'll focus on in the next episode of Getting Clear on Psoriasis, Building the Right Care Team to Treat Your Psoriasis.
I had to do a lot of legwork on my own to get that team. I've been through a lot of doctors, a lot of dermatologists, a lot of specialists, a lot of people that were like, it's all in your head. And you got to let that go. You got to drop that and find somebody who knows that it's not in your head.
That's coming up on Getting Clear on Psoriasis. If you like what you've heard, head over to Apple Podcast and leave a 5-star rating and write a positive review. It'll help spread the word to more people who might be in need of support. And if you know of someone living with psoriasis, be sure to tell them about this podcast. As always, we welcome your feedback. So send us an email to psoriasis@ghlf.org. Until next time, I'm David Brandt. Thanks so much for listening. This podcast is made possible with support from Walgreens and Alliance RX Walgreens Prime, sponsors of the Global Healthy Living Foundation.
Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.